Hey, Reddit. I don't even know where to begin with this story. What started as a sweet moment between my mom and me turned into a family drama that revealed secrets I never imagined existed. Buckle up. This is going to be a wild ride. The dress and the discovery. It all started on what I thought would be a magical day. My mom, 60F, and I, 27F, were in her attic, rummaging through boxes, looking for her wedding dress. My fiancée and I are planning our wedding for next summer, and she casually mentioned a few weeks earlier that she'd kept her gown in pristine condition all these years. I thought it might be fun to see it, and maybe even wear it for my own wedding. My mom seemed thrilled by the idea, so we set aside a day to go searching for it. The attic was a treasure trove of memories. Old photo albums, baby clothes, and even my dad's old vinyl collection cluttered the space. But tucked in the far corner, wrapped in layers of tissue paper and stored inside a large, carefully sealed box, was the dress. When my mom opened the box, she gasped. "It's even more beautiful than I remembered," she said, running her fingers over the delicate lace. The dress was timeless, with a fitted bodice, long lace sleeves, and a flowing skirt that seemed to shimmer even in the dim light of the attic. I was immediately enchanted. "Can I try it on?" I asked, barely able to contain my excitement. My mom beamed and nodded. We carefully carried the box downstairs to my bedroom. It was a surreal moment, watching my mom lift the dress out of its box like it was a relic from another era. She helped me slip into it, adjusting the fabric so it fit just right. It wasn't a perfect fit, but with a little tailoring, it could be. I looked at myself in the mirror, and for a moment, I felt like I'd stepped into her wedding day. "That's amazing," I said, spinning slowly. My mom smiled, her eyes glistening with tears. "You look stunning," she said softly. As I admired the dress, I noticed something unusual. The fabric of the skirt felt heavier than I expected, and every time I moved, I heard a faint rustling sound. At first, I thought it was just the layers of tulle brushing against each other, but the noise was persistent. "What's that sound?" I asked, frowning. My mom tilted her head, confused. "It's probably just the fabric," she said. But as I kept moving, the sound grew louder, almost like paper crinkling. I glanced down and started running my hands over the skirt, trying to locate the source. That's when I felt it, a strange bulge near the hemline. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it was definitely there. "Wait a second," I said, kneeling down to inspect it. As I examined the hem, I noticed a seam that didn't quite match the rest of the stitching. It was small and well hidden, but it looked deliberate. "Mom, did you know this was here?" I asked, pointing to the seam. She leaned in, squinting. "No," she said slowly. "That's not part of the original design. At least, I don't think it is." Curiosity got the better of me. Carefully, I tugged at the seam, and to my surprise, it began to open. A small, hidden compartment had been sewn into the hem of the dress. My mom gasped. "What in the world?" Inside the compartment was a folded envelope. The paper was yellowed and fragile, like it had been there for decades. My mom froze, her expression shifting from curiosity to something I couldn't quite place. Disbelief? Fear? "What is that?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I pulled the envelope out and turned it over in my hands. The front was blank, with no name or markings. "Let's open it," I said, but my mom grabbed my wrist. "Wait," she said, her voice trembling. "I didn't put that there. I don't know what it is." Her reaction caught me off guard. My mom has always been composed, unflappable even in stressful situations. But in that moment, she looked genuinely unsettled. "Do you think Dad put it there?" I asked. I don't know," she said. "I don't know who would have done that." I sat down on the edge of my bed, carefully opening the envelope. My mom sat beside me, watching silently. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded neatly. As I unfolded it, I realized it was a handwritten letter. The ink was faded, but the words were still legible. The first line made my heart stop. It read, "Dear, my dad's name. I want you to know that I will always love you, even if we can't be together." I glanced at my mom, whose face had gone pale. "Do you recognize this handwriting?" I asked. She shook her head, her eyes fixed on the letter. I kept reading, my mind racing with questions. The letter was signed by someone named Lila. My mom's name is not Lila. At that moment, the air in the room felt heavy, like the weight of the letter's contents had filled every corner. My mom sat frozen, staring at the letter with an intensity I'd never seen before. "Who's Lila?" I asked softly. My mom didn't answer right away. Instead, she took a deep breath and said, "I think we need to talk." And that's when everything started unraveling. My mom stared at the letter for what felt like an eternity, her hands trembling slightly. I could see the flood of emotions playing out across her face, shock, confusion, and maybe even fear. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely audible. "I never knew about this," she whispered. "Who is Lila?" I asked again, more firmly this time. She hesitated, then let out a deep sigh. "She was someone your dad was with before me," she admitted. "I knew about her, but I didn't know this." She gestured at the letter, her eyes still fixed on it like it was some kind of cursed artifact. I leaned closer, rereading the words. The letter wasn't long, but it was loaded with emotion. Lila wrote about how much she loved my dad, how hard it was to let him go, and how she wished him happiness with my mom. It was clear she was saying goodbye to him, but there was an unmistakable pain in her words. "Did Dad keep this from you?" I asked, my mind spinning. "I don't know," my mom said, her voice tight. "If he did, I have no idea why he would hide it, and why he would put it in my wedding dress." The realization hit me like a freight train. "Wait," I said. "What if he didn't put it there? What if Lila did?" My mom's head snapped toward me, her eyes wide. "Why would she do that?" she asked, her tone laced with disbelief. I shrugged, trying to piece it together. "I don't know. Maybe it was her way of letting go. Or maybe she wanted to make sure he never forgot her." The silence in the room was deafening. My mom looked like she was trying to process a million thoughts at once. "Do you think Dad ever got over her?" I asked tentatively. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she folded the letter carefully and placed it back in the envelope, as though handling something fragile and sacred. Finally, she said, "I thought he had, but now, I don't know." The letter became an unspoken presence in the days that followed. My mom didn't bring it up again, and I didn't press her. But the more I thought about it, the more I felt like this wasn't something we could ignore. The next time my dad came over for dinner, my parents are still happily married, or so I thought, I couldn't stop staring at him, wondering how much of the secret he was carrying. Was he still holding on to feelings for Lila? Did he marry my mom with unresolved feelings in his heart? After we ate, I decided I couldn't keep quiet any longer. "Dad," I said, my voice firm, "can we talk about something?" He looked up from his plate, confused. "Of course. What's on your mind?" I glanced at my mom, who looked torn between stopping me and wanting to hear his answer just as much as I did. I took a deep breath and pulled the envelope out of my pocket. "This," I said, placing it on the table, "was sewn into Mom's wedding dress. Do you know anything about it?" The color drained from his face as soon as he saw the envelope. He didn't even open it. He didn't need to. His reaction told me everything I needed to know. "Where did you find this?" he asked, his voice shaking. "In Mom's dress," I said. "Why was it there, Dad? And who is Lila?" He sat back in his chair, running a hand through his hair. "Lila," he began, his voice trailing off. He looked at my mom, his eyes filled with guilt. "She was someone I loved before I met you." My mom stayed silent, her face unreadable. "I thought I'd gotten rid of that letter," he continued, his voice heavy. "I never wanted you to find it." "Why?" My mom asked, her tone sharp. Why did you hide it? And why was it in my dress? I didn't put it there, he said quickly. I swear I didn't. It must have been Lila. I don't know why she would have done that. Maybe it was her way of saying goodbye. The room fell silent. My mom looked like she was about to cry, but she held it together. I could see the questions swirling in her mind. Questions she probably never dared to ask before. The discovery of the letter shifted everything. My mom started questioning the foundation of their relationship. Were you really over her when we got married? She asked one night, her voice trembling. I was. My dad insisted. I loved you. I love you. Lila was my past, but you're my future. You always have been. But my mom wasn't convinced. The letter had dredged up insecurities she hadn't felt in years, and it was clear that she was struggling to reconcile the truth with the life they'd built together. As for me, I felt like I'd stumbled into a part of my parents' history I was never supposed to know. The letter wasn't just a relic of their past. It was a reminder of how complicated relationships can be. It made me question everything I thought I knew about them and about the nature of love itself. This wasn't just their story anymore. It was mine too. It became clear that this revelation wasn't something my family could sweep under the rug. My mom tried to act like everything was fine, but there was a tension between her and my dad that hadn't been there before. Little comments here and there hinted at her lingering doubts, and I could tell she was replaying the past in her head, trying to figure out if there had been signs she'd missed. One night, about a week after we found the letter, I overheard my parents having an intense conversation. They thought I was asleep, but their voices carried down the hallway. I need to know the truth, my mom said. When we got married, were you still in love with her? No, my dad said, but his voice sounded strained. I wasn't in love with her anymore, but I didn't stop caring about her overnight, okay? She was a big part of my life. It wasn't easy to just forget everything. That's not what I'm asking, my mom pressed. Did you marry me because you loved me, or because you couldn't have her? There was a long silence. When my dad finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. I married you because I loved you, he said. But I won't lie to you. When I first met you, I was still grieving her. It took me time to let her go completely. I could feel my mom's heartbreak from the hallway. It was like the foundation of her entire marriage had been shaken. The next day, I decided to sit down with my mom. She looked exhausted, like she hadn't slept all night. Are you okay? I asked, knowing the answer before she even said anything. She sighed heavily. I don't know. I feel like my whole marriage has been a lie. Like I was someone's second choice. I grabbed her hand. Mom, you're not a second choice. Look at everything you and Dad have built together. He loves you, and he's proven that over and over. But what if I was just convenient, she said, her voice cracking. What if he only chose me because she wasn't an option anymore? Her words broke my heart, but they also made me angry. I didn't want my mom to feel like her worth was tied to someone else's decisions. You're not convenient, I said firmly. You're strong, you're kind, and you've been the backbone of this family for as long as I can remember. Dad chose you. And even if he wasn't perfect back then, he's chosen you every single day since. That conversation seemed to help, but it was clear that there were still wounds that needed healing. A few days later, my dad suggested we have a family meeting to address everything. We need to stop letting this fester, he said. I don't want this to tear us apart. The three of us sat down in the living room, and my dad started by apologizing. I'm sorry for how this has hurt you, he said, looking at my mom. I didn't handle my feelings for Lila the way I should have. And if I could go back, I'd do things differently. But I want you to know that you are the love of my life. You always have been. My mom was quiet for a moment, then nodded. I believe you, she said softly. But it's going to take me time to work through this. Then, to my surprise, my dad turned to me. And I owe you an apology, too, he said. You shouldn't have been the one to find that letter. It's not fair that you've had to carry this burden. I'm glad I found it, I admitted. "It's made me see you both as real people, not just mom and dad. But I think you owe each other honesty more than you owe me an apology. This letter didn't just show up. It was hidden for a reason. Maybe it's time to figure out why." As difficult as it was, my parents took my advice to heart. They started talking more openly about their past, things they'd never shared before. My dad told my mom more about his relationship with Lila, and my mom shared her insecurities from the early years of their marriage. It wasn't an easy process, and there were plenty of tears along the way. But slowly, I started to see a shift. Instead of letting the letter drive a wedge between them, they used it as an opportunity to rebuild trust. My mom admitted that hearing my dad say he'd chosen her, not just once, but every day, helped her start to let go of her doubts. As for me, I learned a lot about resilience and forgiveness. My parents aren't perfect, but their willingness to confront their past and move forward together was inspiring. This experience changed the way I see my family. My parents' love story isn't the fairy tale I thought it was, but it's real, and that makes it even more meaningful. They've faced challenges, made mistakes, and carried baggage, but they've also chosen to keep building a life together despite it all. For me, the biggest lesson was about honesty. Secrets, no matter how well-intentioned, have a way of surfacing, and when they do, they can either destroy relationships or strengthen them, depending on how you choose to handle them. As I prepare for my own wedding, I've been thinking a lot about what kind of marriage I want. My parents' story isn't perfect, but it's taught me the importance of communication, forgiveness, and choosing love, even when it's hard. And yes, I still plan to wear the dress, hidden compartment and all.